Hey guys, it's Raz. All right, so today we start to make the shift into looking at how we can do better in terms of agriculture, right? Clearly, agriculture's advances were necessary in order to keep our population fed. But I like to think that when you know better, do better, right? And now we know some of the harmful effects that are coming out of it. So we look to see how we can continue to produce high yield, but also try to be a little bit more eco friendly. So one of the ways that we look into this is how do we deal with pests? How do we deal with bugs? So I wanted to introduce you today to something called integrated pest management, or IPM for short. The basic idea is that there's a wide variety of pest controls that you're going to use, and the goal is to minimize pesticide use and environmental disruption. So, a lot of this is kind of researching and monitoring, getting to know the pests that are sharing our crops with us, and trying to target methods specifically to that one pest's life cycle. So sometimes this means we have to get to know, when they're active or when they breed or how they, where they lay their eggs, the types of things they like to, and we can then target to specifically, hit that pest. One of the ways that we can do this is through something called biocontrol, which is bringing in a natural pet predator or parasite to control the pest. This is a great method when it works, but it does take very careful planning because it's very easy for biocontrol to not go how we planned it. But we've had successful biocontrol methods in the past. In fact, Africa kind of solved a water hyacinth problem. So water hyacinth was a plant that was growing in their waterways that was making it so the water didn't really move, causing sicknesses to build up. So people that were fishing from the water in the water were contracting some of these bacterial illnesses, and they ended up using weevils. The weevils ate the water hyacinth. It worked perfectly. Water hyacinth was gone. Things were great. It doesn't always go perfectly. The other thing that we can do is we can rotate crops. So if we rotate crops, let's say one particular bug likes the corn, and they feed on the corn one year and they lay their eggs, and the eggs are set to harvest next year. Those eggs maybe specifically, or those larvae maybe specifically need to eat that one plant that it was laid by. If the following year or when those eggs hatch, we have a different plant planted there, they don't have a food source, right? So think of now this is a good bug. I don't want to say we're going to get rid of these, but like monarch butterflies, for example. Monarchs, larvae will only eat milkweed. If there isn't milkweed for them, they don't survive, right? So again, if we can target and get to know our pests, we can target to that. The other thing we can do is intercropping, kind of as a similar idea. All right, so let's talk a little bit about biocontrol. I mentioned some of it already. So this, like I mentioned, we're using a natural predator, parasite, or competitor, and we literally will purchase and release that organism into the area that we need them to attack. Common ones are ladybugs for aphids and spiders for lots of different pest insects. Now, as a kind of like small scale gardener myself, there's some biocontrol that I even rely on. So for example, I get really excited when I see, praying mantises and ladybugs in my garden because I know that they're taking care of some of those. I had lacewings that were they're kind of like dragonflies, similar esque, but they were eating tons and tons of my little critters this year, and it was awesome to see them. We also have some parasitic wasps that we can use for caterpillars. We've got to be a little careful on the wasps because sometimes they can compete with natural pollinators, but it's a good one too. Okay, so I already mentioned what I needed to, I think, for crop rotation to try to prevent that food choice from being used. Okay, so again, the idea here is we're trying to prevent pests from becoming established. If we disrupt that food cycle for them, they lose that. The other thing that this does, that I didn't mention was it disrupts weed growth. So crops being planted at different times prevents bare soil from being taken over by weeds. So that's like a kind of side bonus, right? Yay, good stuff. Okay, so let's talk a little more about intercropping now that I have this here. Because I needed this image before. So the idea with intercropping is it's something called a push-pull system. So what they'll do is they will plant plants that are what we call push plants. So they're going to emit some sort of a chemical that whatever the pest species is doesn't like. It will repel it. So in this specific example, they planted desmodium between their corn, and desmodium produces a chemical that many moth species do not like at all. So it's going to sort of push the desmodium away or push the moths away from the crop. The other thing they'll do is they'll plant a pole plant like on the outskirts of the crops that will attract those particular bug or moth or whatever they're trying to attract, and will get them to lay eggs there instead of in their crop. So in this case, it's Napier grass. The moths love Napier grass. They will lay eggs there. They'll go there. So that's kind of what they do. They pull them away. So the nice thing is the pole plants are actually providing habitat for the natural pest predators that you don't want in your crops, right? And with intercropping too, if as we previously talked about, that desmodium's kind of a cover crop, right? So we're having the benefits of the soil conservation as well. So it's nice. And again, if you know anybody who's a gardener, a lot of times gardeners will plant things like, oh my gosh, my brain is going blank right now. Whatever. There's two flowers. Oh, Nastarium. That's one of them. And there's another one that we plant quite a bit around the gardens because they attract a lot of those little critters that I don't want to eat in my garden. All right. So benefits and drawbacks. Again, pros and cons to everything, right? Pros, reduces death and mutation from non-target species. So this is trying to make sure that we don't have those frogs and eagles and bees having issues because of chemicals that we're using to protect our crops. And it reduces the effect of human consumers on produce. So we're using less chemicals, right? We're still using them in a lot of cases. Again, integrated pest management isn't one way of doing things. It's taking a variety of different things, hence the term integrated, and using them. Okay. Take that. And the other thing it does is it reduces the contamination of surface and groundwater by runoff, right? Again, if we're using less chemicals, there's less runoff in relation. And again, I'm not saying we're not using any, we're just using fewer. So some of the drawbacks definitely can be more time consuming, and it definitely can be more costly than just quick spray, right? So it's more of a time commitment. You've got to research, you've got to plant specific things, and you kind of have to wait and let nature take its course. So again, I'm not making you do these, but this is something to think about. If you look at the data that's there, justify whether or not these data support the use of biocontrol in limiting or of a biocontrol method of limiting pest damage. So you can kind of see what's going on there with 4 different biological controls, with a non-treated control, with a chemical control, and you can see the percent that was damaged. So take a peek at it, see what you can think, and see you next time.